Yes,
Yay.
indeed.
Three
um,
whole days.
3 whole days. Yeah, for those of us who still kind of feel weekends.
Hmm.
My schedule's all over the place, so I'm like, oh yeah, there's like Mondays off for some people. So,
Yeah.
but it's fun.
Mondays are a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Hey Todd, how's it going? Long
Hi,
time no
Todd.
see. We did our patron hangout, our monthly patron hangout yesterday, so that was fun. That was a good time. Um, so yeah, we are going to be talking about the end of TNG season 5. You made it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it?
I made it. Now, yeah. So five full seasons of. I'm feeling great about it. These were really fun episodes. Um, and uh, yeah, loving it.
Awesome. So yeah, we are going to discuss the episodes The Perfect Mate, Imaginary Friend, I Borg, The Next Phase, The Inner Light, and Time's Arrow. We got some gems in here. So
We got some good ones
yeah,
to talk about.
to focus on.
Yeah, to focus on exactly.
But kicking things off, we have two maybe less high on people's favorites list.
Mm-hmm.
So are we good to just dive in?
Let's do it.
Hey, how's it going? So Perfect Mate. This one is basically Famke Johnson's episode.
Yeah.
It's she pops up and it's always like, oh wait, oh yeah. Um, and she's basically a woman who is being shipped to be in an arranged marriage to hopefully end a war because she has some telepathic ability to like read and respond to male emotion.
Uh-huh.
So
She adapts herself to the male gaze, like, and that's like a thing, and she basically says it.
yeah.
um, yeah, so not a fan.
Hey, we call. Hey, Andy.
I
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a rough episode. I mean, this is like when people talk about the Ferengi. This is one that's like not necessarily one that we would want to talk about.
Mm.
So, um, I mean, it's one of the reasons that like we're not wild about the Ferengi as a whole. So I don't know, like what did you think about this episode? Like overall.
It's funny. At first, I was, yeah, no. Overall, thumbs
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
for sure. Um, yeah, I don't like the Ferengi.
I know. I'm so sorry. I promise you
No.
might like them later. You might like them. I do grow to love them.
Yeah, I know. You've spoken about that before, so I'm just like I'm just trying to wait for when that's going to happen. I don't know if it
It's not going to
will.
happen in TNG. It's not going to happen
Right.
in TNG. So it's like, yeah, don't even. Even when they come on in TNG, I'm kind of just like, oh.
Oh, cringe.
Yeah. And there's not that many episodes, but fun fact, this episode does have Max Grodinchek as one of the Ferengi, who is then not this character, but the actor plays a recurring Ferengi in Deep Space Nine. So it's a familiar face for those of us who
Okay.
love the Ferengi in Deep Space Nine. He plays Rom, but yeah, this one is interesting too because this is I'm just gonna throw down some Star Trek facts, but this is the one where so Michael Piller was executive producer during this time, and the person who wrote the sort of teleplay, like the general story of it, this is his last name is Later. This is the only time under Pillar's executive producing that a writer asked to be credited as a pseudonym. That, yeah. So, there's sometimes where they're not super wild about what their stories have turned into, and they decide to be credited as a pseudonym. So,
Wow.
that says a lot.
That says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, And
not the best story.
yeah, and Mikhail makes a good point. The culture of the Ferengi is awful, but there are some gems, but we don't get to see any gems until Deep Space Nine. So, are we good talking about that one?
We can move on. I liked seeing Famke Jameson with Patrick Stewart. That was fun.
Yeah, and this was only her second acting job.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, the next one was Imaginary Friend, and this is the one where you basically have a girl on the Enterprise, which is funny because we've just continually like built up our headcanon of how the Enterprise runs and that there are children hanging out here. But she's essentially her name's Clara. She's just moved to the Enterprise with her dad, and she has this imaginary friend, Isabella, to keep her company. Her imaginary friend appears and seems real, and then starts to like go kind of evil and weird and convinces her to do bad things and peer pressure. So for me watching this, like the last episode was one of those where it was like I was paying attention and I just kind of watched it. This one, like, I like the premise. Like Andy said, it's pretty creative premise. It's slow though. And I found myself being like, oh yeah, there's other stuff I need to be doing, and turning it off. And it actually took me 3 rounds to come back and finish this episode.
Oh my God.
So I don't know what your thoughts were on this one.
I mean, yeah, it was a little bit slow. And I have to admit, I kind of had it on and was sort of cooking and doing some stuff and thinking like, this is a pretty clear story. I'm not sure I need to pay complete attention. Let's just get it going. I mean, it was sort of a wasted opportunity in a way, because it's such an interesting concept. I feel like the imaginary friend that gets materialized by the alien. And it just feels like it didn't really take. It was sort of like a non-story, because by the alien is actually nice, but speaking through this like demonic Alice in Wonderland character with like robotic evil sounding voice, even when they're being nice at the very end, it was really kind of bizarre.
It's pretty bizarre. And
but I love
sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. I love the one bit with Worf where he sees both of them. Like, and he's like, what are you doing? Okay.
Another Worfable moment.
Worfable.
Yeah. No, it's pretty good. And I think we all agree that the story premise itself is interesting. Imaginary friends on their whole are creepy. Kids are creepy. And it plays off of that pretty well. So it's just a little bit slow of a story. It's like you said, it's like, we get it. Yeah. We get the premise. And the little after school special of like, don't succumb to peer pressure. And I think it is good. Like, it does reflect childhood loneliness pretty well. Oh wow, Mikhail. Yeah, she mentioned that kids who have hallucinations and stuff. Yeah, that would be.
Well, it is kind of freaky because like imaginary friends are a completely normal thing. I don't think I know anybody who's never had an imaginary friend, but then if you factor in the fact like maybe they are real, like you would discount it for a while because, oh, how sweet, she has an imaginary friend, and then like, are they actually real? Because maybe they are having a hallucination. It's like, it's creepy.
It is creepy. Hey, Hipson. Good morning. N7, represent. All right, so let's get to some of these gems.
Yes, let's do it.
Borg. We gotta dwell on Borg. So did you actually go back and watch this one recently?
I did. Well, Hipson. I watched it before watching Picard, so I hadn't seen it yet at that time, so I skipped ahead to watch it for Picard. So I watched it again this time.
You did? Okay. I didn't know if you watched it a second time. Yeah.
I did, yes. Oh, it's such an emotional episode, and I think I liked it even better the second time, because there were like other things I could pay attention to, and so good.
It's so good. This episode is so good, and I was kind of reflecting on it a little bit. I mean, okay, so we should probably recap, just in case people don't know what this episode is. This is the one where they find the crash Borg, and then they take one of them on the ship who's not dead, and he starts to develop a personality. He wants a name. They call him Hugh. This is Jonathan Del Arco. This is the Hugh that came back in Picard. So the whole arc and evolution is just so good.
Oh, good.
It blows my mind. And I think for me, when I was kind of watching it again and reflecting on it, I think, I don't want to say for sure because my memories of like my early relationship with Star Trek are a little bit scattered, but I think this is one of those first ones, if not the first one that I watched, where I was like, holy crap, this show is good. You know,
really?
Where I was emotionally just like sucked into it. Because I remember all of, you know, I didn't really know much about the Borg, if any, and I had been watching Star Trek, but I think this is, if not the first, one of the first where I was just like, wow, this is intense. And the thing that really works is the chemistry and the relationship with Geordi and Hugh.
Yes.
I think they are,
They're so good. And it's funny, this just occurred to me, is Geordi, like, he's so, I don't want to use the word like innocent, but he's so like just open-minded and friendly. Like he becomes friend. He's like friends with Data, and Data's, you know, he treats him like a friend, which we'll get to in the next one. And he doesn't see people as Earth or beings as, you know, inherently evil, I guess. He does at the beginning with the Borg, but then he like comes around to it and just really is like interested in who he's becoming, and it's so sweet.
Well, that is a good point about his character, because I think we've seen that when he's, you know, created holograms of, you know, these past engineers, and like you said, his relationship with Data, he's very much just as a character a very inquisitive, talkative, friendly person. And through that, you know, where he's just like making small talk with Hugh when Hugh hasn't kind of fully fleshed out, and just kind of, that's interesting. Oh, would you like a name? Yeah, let me explain to you, you know, and genuinely answering his questions and being patient and treating him with so much kindness.
I know. So great. But I had a major question, storytelling wise in Star Trek. So my first introduction to the Borg was Voyager, right?
Right.
And it seemed, I'm pretty sure I was probably missing some certain throwaway lines that were references back to earlier seasons and series, but it seemed like they were saying during Voyager that, like, you know, the saving Seven of Nine and her coming back from being a Borg was like this once in a like the first time that's ever been done. It was sort of like they were saying this is this incredible scientific and psychological achievement. It's something that is a new thing that's been done. But obviously during Enterprise, Picard comes back, Hugh comes back. So was there something I missed in Voyager where they sort of like referenced to this happening? Because it seemed like Seven was like, oh my God, we brought a Borg back.
Your picture froze briefly in the most perfect face of shock. Right when you went, no, you're good, you're back. But that was perfect.
I think I might be freezing a few times here. My internet's deciding to skits out as well, so
no worries. Yeah, it's a good question, and actually I'd be curious for people too to feel free to weigh in on the chat on this. I guess my interpretation of that was, at least when I watched Voyager, I knew Locutus and Picard, and I knew Hugh. And I think in Voyager, I think it was much, at least the way I interpret it, is the achievement is that she spent her whole life as Borg. that she was
Oh.
raised with the Borg, like, you know, child to adult, and it was years and decades of like she knew practically nothing else. And so then bringing her back and introducing to her to humanity when she like doesn't even, she never even experienced adulthood as a human. um that's kind of how I read it, whereas like Hugh and Picard were assimilated as adults, and so
Hmm.
they still had those memories of their former life.
That's a really good point. I think that's probably, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of the um, a lot of what I was picking up from Voyager was really based on the fact that she was young, and I didn't quite appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, Raj, exactly. That's that she was assimilated at a young age, and
Oh.
then Andy was saying that originally, upon encountering the Borg, they found Borg nurseries. So, do we distinguish between those Borg and folks who are actually assimilated?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, were the nursery? I don't really remember the nurseries necessarily. Of like, were they kids or babies that were assimilated, or were they actually like lab grown Matrix style?
I'm not sure I remember seeing this
Yeah. Oh,
yet.
Mikhail, I do not blame you. Uh, he said the Borg are the reason I'm not introducing Star Trek to my kid yet because it's a recipe for nightmares. That's
Uh
fair.
huh.
I still think the
You must
Borg.
avoid.
Yeah. I still think the Borg are like the scariest. They're legitimately scary. That even as much as
Hmm.
we've seen them defeated by Janeway and everything. When they come in and they're like, you know, we are the Borg, it
Hmm.
gets you every time. Um,
Yeah. And
okay.
I like in this episode, like I'm starting to now have that like association with the Borg. So in this episode, when Riker was like, "We have an incoming ship," blah 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 blah, formation cubicle. I was like, "No."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the lore and everything around the Borg is brilliant.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, Raj said there's only one episode you see a baby in a Borg incubator. They're creepy,
Mm.
man. It's creepy.
They're
It's
so creepy.
in a good way, but in a creepy way.
Yeah, but I do. I mean, it feels like a Borg, like Seven or Hugh or even Picard, reclaiming your identity is from that is basically just a really beautiful metaphor for the triumph and tenacity of the human spirit, because you're fighting against this oppression
Yeah.
basically to become an individual again. I mean, that's a really big message.
And I think what they address really well in this episode is that loneliness of getting
Yeah.
used to having being a part of a community, which I think transcends the Borg scary side of things and is more understandable.
Hmm.
So Domestic said, yeah, Hugh stays very much Borg and returns to the collective for the rest of TNG, and yeah, that's exactly true. That broke my heart. That broke my heart when he
Yeah.
was like, "I want to stay with Geordi, but it's dangerous." I was like, "Oh,
So dramatic.
you're killing me."
I know. And the when he says, "I don't want to forget that I am Hugh," that broke me.
And they
I
do
was
such
like,
a good job of like when he's coming back and you think you're worried that he has, you know, they kind of scan
mm-hmm.
him, and then he just looks at Jordy. That last
Yeah.
look. Oh, it's so good.
Oh.
Oh man, First Contact. I mean, First Contact like has. I think the Borg are scary in it, but I don't. Well, I don't know. I think it is pretty scary, but three is probably one of those that is
Mm-hmm.
still evolving the idea of fear and assimilations. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's really interesting. Um, but yeah, I think with Hugh, they've kind of established, at least maybe in Picard, that he's human. They never really, yeah, he's a humanoid race of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when he doesn't want to forget being Hugh. So good. Oh, that's funny. That's really funny. What's the guy doing with the thing on his head? That's awesome.
That's
Um,
so cute.
so yeah, I mean, it's a good question though. I think how they look at Hugh and how they look at Picard versus Seven of Nine,
Mm-hmm.
and that achievement. But um, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I personally think Seven and Hugh were like the highlights of Picard, the show.
They were definitely up there.
Yeah. So it's really good. All right. Any final thoughts on that one?
No, it's so good.
So other than it's just so good. It's so good. All right. So let's move on then to the next phase. This is the episode where they have a distress call from a Romulan science ship. They go onto the ship to try to figure out what's going on, and they're tinkering around, and it's Geordi and Ro are there, and when they try to transport back with the missing engine piece that they're going to go replicate on the ship and then bring it back to help the Romulans, they basically don't make it back. Which is, as we've debated many times here, how the transporters work. This is sort of that evidence that they are actually transporting the molecules themselves, not a data pattern that they then build out of other material. But it contradicts itself many times. This is just one of the things in that camp that says you're transporting.
One of the checks in that column.
Exactly. And then when they do sort of transport, they appear back on the Enterprise, but no one can see them. But they can see each other. And they're trying to figure out how to get detected and how to be seen again, and whereas everyone on the ship is like mourning their death. And then it turns out that the Romulan technology that they were using was like this advanced shady Romulan technology and messed them up, and there is a way to bring them back, I think by anion burst, some quality techno babble.
Something phase variance.
Yeah, there's a lot of phase variance there, which was great. So what were your thoughts on this one?
This was such a fun episode. I actually really enjoyed this. It was fun to watch, Geordi and Ro have some scenes together, and it was a great way to sort of introduce different perspectives on death and mourning from all the different cultures and races, particularly Worf talking to Data. I thought that was really interesting. And Data as well, trying to process, no pun intended, the
quality Data joke.
Right. I try. Trying to process Geordi's death and, kind of realizing that Geordi really treated him as a friend, like we alluded to earlier, and trying to really work through that quote unquote emotion for him. I thought that was really, I thought Data in this episode was particularly interesting. On
that note, I really like the fact that Data is doesn't just, it's like he gets all the information about all the different cultural ways of processing death, and then he kind of throws out a lot. Like he picks and chooses based on the personalities, He's like, well, this is what I think would be good, and then he puts together this like conglomerate wake thing where they walk in, and it's probably my favorite moment of the episode is when Ro and Geordi walk into their wake, and Ro is like, what? Like, this is a party. And Geordi's walks in and he's like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
This is perfect. And it was. I think it felt really perfect.
Yeah. I love that moment too, because it made me feel like Geordi, like Data really knew Geordi. Like, this is what he'll like. And Ro, I mean, it did feel like maybe he threw something together for Geordi as opposed to Ro, but at the same time, I did like that.
Yeah, but she even explicitly said, and Data didn't know this, but she was like, God, I hope they don't do the Bajoran, like, ritual.
Right, exactly.
As sort of, traditional as she is, she was just like, throw that out. But Raj, I agree with you, like, the thriller part of the series. This is a good one, and I like, too, the relationship with Geordi and Data, where Geordi is like, Data will figure it out. And he just goes and hovers around him and moves and figures out how, and he's looking at how Data's trying to think about, the problem. And he's like, okay, so if I do this, is he picking that up? If I do this, and so it's like they problem solve together, which is just a great testament to their relationship.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a really fun problem solving scene. And I love the nick of time, element in this. They solve it just in the nick of time. Like,
which you've pointed out before is some of your favorite. They slide in, the scientists are like, we got it.
Yeah.
Right when they're about to give up.
Like, the episode's almost over. Okay, we got
That's one of the things I love. If people haven't seen this before, there's an improv group that does next gen improv here in Los Angeles, and I'll post a link to it. For some reason I'm spacing on the name. We know I'm terrible with proper nouns. This is why I take notes. So the improvised generation. It's the improvised generation, and but they do exactly what you just mentioned, where it's like they improvise an entire next gen episode, and then it's like, okay, they've got a timer, and it's like, okay, we're at 45 minutes, like, wrap it up. Oh, we figured it out. So it is a very like tight writing structure, which I appreciate.
I actually have another note about it for the next episode. I think that.
Oh, good. Awesome.
2 episodes. That's another funny thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I like too the when they're hearing how everyone's talking about them, after they died.
Yeah.
That's always a good storytelling.
Yeah, it's the whole was it Tom Sawyer thing, going to your own funeral and hearing what people say. It's fun.
We got sort of Geordi's origin story with Picard, where he stayed up all night to fix this offhand comment that Picard made. And then it's interesting because I had forgotten the Ro Riker thing. And
it doesn't get resolved, and I want to know.
Because because we had the episode where they all had like forgot their memories and then they hooked up, which is hilarious in its own right. But then in this one, Riker's gonna say something, like he wants to say something about Ro at the funeral, and she's just like, no.
Yeah.
It's adorable. So
it is adorable.
I love it. Anyway, any other thoughts on this one?
No, I loved the little bit of them running through the different rooms. She's trying to get away from the Romulan.
Oh my gosh.
Like full on Kitty Pryde style.
So good. And we got sort of those like behind the scenes, like, where people are like getting out of their sonic shower and the other dude's like doing push-ups and stretching in his quarters.
So fun.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah, that was a really fun little detail.
I did like one of those, again, similarly sort of details, was like when they're in 10 forward and they're trying to like get seen right at the end of the episode. And the shot is positioned where it's like Riker has gone to pick up his trombone, and then Picard and Data are there, and then Geordi and Ro are sort of off to the side, and the whole time Riker is playing the trombone in the background. The whole time. So he thanks, Michael. Yeah, we don't have links allowed in here, but thank you for sending that. We'll try to share that with people, but they can find it on YouTube. That was the improvised generation. I thought it was hilarious to just see. I like picking up those background things, and I was just amazed that they angled the shot such that Jonathan Frakes is playing the trombone for an extended period of time in the background, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's quite a shot to frame, because trombones are,
right.
It's not the easiest instrument. Like, couldn't you play the trumpet instead?
Right. But I did, I personally love that story, especially coming from like a Celtic family. The idea of the wakes is the celebration, or it was like, this is
totally.
Like, it's disorienting, but then it's like, no, this is right. This feels right. So
absolutely.
I love it. All right. Any final thoughts?
Nah, we can move on.
All right. The Inner Light. Oh, man.
Ooh.
This episode kills me.
This was interesting.
This is your first time watching this episode.
It is.
And, okay, briefly, before we get into it, if people don't haven't seen this or don't remember what it is, this is the flute episode. Which is literally what my partner said when he walked through the room and went, "Is that the flute episode?" But it is on most people's top 10, if not top episodes of all of Star Trek TNG. Yeah.
I could see it.
Low. Yeah. That it's a unique story. We have seen this in other Star Trek. So they encounter this alien probe. Picard falls to the ground. He wakes up in another life, lives out 40 years in that life, and then wakes up. And then they basically, his friends, his family, show up as they were when he first woke up, and basically say, yeah, so like we're all about to die. This star's going to Nova. We want you to carry on our memories and be free. And then he wakes up 20 minutes after he passed out, after having lived for 40 years, and he remembers to play the flute. So I'm desperate to know your thoughts on this, because as a first-time viewer of this episode.
Well, yeah, so my notes for this episode encompass the words 5 years, flute, nursery, Outlander theme song, and 25 minutes.
That was a decent... I should have let you do the summary of the episode.
But joking aside, I mean, that is actually what I wrote, but...
That's awesome.
I have to admit, I didn't get the ending, but I feel like that doesn't even matter as much as the fact that this was Picard's story. And like, I was surprised that he, quote unquote, succumbed to what they were doing. He succumbed to this story, and still somehow maintained his identity, it seemed like, with like building the telescope and mapping the stars and everything, and yet still being fully committed, after a little bit of time had passed, to being this person, which I just thought that was an interesting insight into Picard's character. Like, maybe there's something that they're saying he's yearning for, as a person. But yeah.
That's a really interesting take on it. How did you feel about like the ending? I mean, did it get you emotionally? Like,
well, I think I either missed something in the beginning of the episode, or just missed something when they were saying we're about to die, because I wasn't able to connect the fact that they were there as they were when he had first gotten to the planet, telling him these things. So I was like, so who's Picard in this? Was anybody else not real? Because the one guy shows up again when he's really old, at the same age.
Right.
And so then I was like, okay, something's going on. But I didn't get the timing and how they pulled him in, and they all grew old with him, but then they weren't old and nobody was there. So I was like, what's going on?
Okay. Yeah, so like the way that I kind of have viewed it is that essentially, and Mikhail mentioned this, that he has to carry the memories of this culture in the collective, that he encompassed a character, Kamen, and that this was a person in their culture. And they basically created, I mean, another way to think about it is a holodeck program.
Yeah.
That you go in and you live out your life as this person. And then when you are about to die, like when he's super old and about to die, then it's kind of like, computer and program. And they come back as their like initial people and explain, like, we need you to hold our story, because otherwise no one's going to remember who we are or anything.
Yeah. And I heard that, and I got that part. It's just there was sort of like almost too many details, like for me to like. I got the fact that there was this race that wanted to be remembered, and I think they just sort of stuffed a little too much in that for
That's fair.
and I was like, wait, was there something else I'm supposed to be getting here about who these people are and what time period this is and whether but yeah, the whole idea of them, oh, I guess that was my question, is like, do they keep doing this on a loop, like connecting to people, saying and forcing them to live through this like 40 years of life and then being like, remember us? Like, I guess that was like, do they keep doing this? Is this just what they do?
I think so. I mean, well, so no, actually no, because
involuntary holodeck program.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll mention kind of what Todd said in a second, but because they take the probe on the ship and it has the flute in it, and Riker says that it self-destructed essentially, like it shut itself down. So I think it did have just the mission to find a person, transmit this story, and then have it end. But it's brutal. I mean, that's brutal. And that's what Todd mentioned, is like that they let him go back to being a captain by the next episode, that he's so much back in active duty, and you're like, dude, he hasn't captained a starship in 40 years.
Yeah.
It's not like riding a bike. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't captained I'm pretending to captain a starship. So it's surprising. But for me, it's interesting because, and actually, Mikhail, that's a good point too, that why he specifically was chosen. If it's because he was the leader of the ship, or if it was like that he's the one that was trying to connect with it, you know, to open up a channel, or if it was a personality thing that he could handle it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I remember when I watched this episode, it's always filed in my mind as like, I'm gonna cry during this episode. And I cry a lot, so it doesn't say a lot of, you know, I'm a very emotional person who lives in my fictional worlds, and that's my happy place, and there's a lot of feelings in there. And then when it starts, I'm like, I've aged out of this episode. Like, this isn't, you know, this isn't much. All right, I can take this. I don't know why I think this was so emotional. And then as he just gets older and older and older, and knowing what's going to happen, that he's going to he's living out this life that is just going to not exist anymore. I think it is emotional. Like, it does start to get heavier, you know, realizing that he's going to come out of this. I think the bit that does get me, and it still continues to get me, is when he just picks up the flute and he remembers it. And you can see, I mean, Patrick Stewart's like, he's Patrick Stewart for a reason, but you can see when he's in his room and he seems just kind of lost, and the lights are down, and Riker comes in, and you can tell he can tell, but you can see Picard is just like carrying this weight, you know, this like, God, I want to be here? And I love that you made that point about another part of his personality that I think we have touched on before, with that, you know, his family in the vineyard, and that we saw in Picard and all of that, that there is a side to him that does just want to settle down and will always want to settle down. So
yeah, absolutely. That last scene was kind of heartbreaking because it was real, you know, it helps him know that it was real, but he's the only, no one else can relate to it. He just has these memories, you know, and has to deal with that, having that memory. And, you know, on the one hand, maybe using the flute is connecting too much to it, and he can't let himself do that as much, because as the captain, you know, he has to compartmentalize this kind of thing. And that's kind of heartbreaking to me.
And I'm glad too that you brought up the point about like the involuntary aspect of it, that he's forced to live this out, because they come back to this storytelling type in Deep Space Nine as from another culture that does something similar, that is used as a punishment, that is used as like a criminal, you know, a way of like imprisoning people and punishing them for their behavior, is to force them to live out time that doesn't exist in real time. That's a doozy of an episode, but we'll get to that.
We'll get there.
All All right. Any also fun fact, I think some people might know, but they did use this flute theme as the basis for the theme of Picard.
Nice.
So if it sounded sort of familiar, that's where you knew it from.
Well, it sounded, the first three notes are the first three notes of the Outlander theme song. Like there's da 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 da, and then it goes somewhere else. And I was like, it was messed with my brain so much.
And it is so the Outlander theme song is also based on like a ancient Scottish song. So that's where like I knew it from, because I was like, oh, that's Scottish. So yeah, we all have our reference points, but I love that you kept pulling you out, and maybe that was part of the reason, maybe too, that you didn't as emotionally get invested in it, is you were pulled out every single time you heard that song.
Could be.
I mean, that will do it to someone. So that's interesting. All right, last episodes. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Times Arrow.
Yay! I love this more every single time I watch it. So
it was so fun.
We're gonna do the two-parter. You haven't seen this before. Picard uses the flute again with a love interest. Smirt. Yeah, we'll look out for that one. So you haven't seen this one. I love this episode. When they basically, it's like I'll stop geeking out about it in a second. But it's just when they get that call to go back because they found something, I'm like, all right, we're in. And then they find Data's head. And so for people who don't remember this is where they find Data's head that has been buried for like hundreds of years since the 19th century. And they're like, oh, Picard, we're going to need you to sort this out. And so they try to figure out how Data's head got to the century. And it's it's a great, I think we've talked about this, and I know this has gone down in other Star Trek discussions and stuff as well, but this is a tight time travel story. There's like no paradoxes that are left behind. Like it wraps itself together with such a nice bow. And so yeah, this is also, if it's still not coming back to you, this is the Mark Twain episode with Guinan. That's all that needs to be said.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah. So I really want to hear your thoughts about this.
Oh my God. This episode was so much fun. I'm obsessed with the like historical and holodeck episodes. Like that's totally my thing. And yeah, I mean, thinking about the time travel stuff, like this is one of the only time travel things, episodes, storylines that I actually understood.
Awesome.
Really, because you're right. Just, and then that's how Data's head got there, and that's how the watch got there, and like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
This is less stressful.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm grabbing my notes.
And then even the fact, like, when Data says, what does he say? It has occurred, it will occur.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that made sense to me. I was like, I get it.
I get this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But also, like, really fun thing for me. So they're like, there's this space-time distortion in the Presidio of San Francisco, which is like over there for me. Like it's a 10-minute drive away.
That's
like,
awesome.
I'm actually going there tomorrow.
That's amazing. I love that. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, so one of my favorite fun facts about this one that I want to make sure I mention, so I don't forget, is that, oh God, where did I write this down? This is old notes. Okay, so Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, when he comes, we'll get to all these too. I just want to make sure I say this before I forget, because this is like my favorite trivia thing. When he gets on the Enterprise, he comes in and he's like, so what are you guys learning? Like, and he throws out Halley's Comet, right? That's like the one thing. He's like, so have you seen Halley's Comet? And it turns out that historically, Mark Twain had a huge connection to Halley's Comet. He was like obsessed with it. That it showed up like when, I think it showed up when he was born, 1835. And then he said he was like, had this thing of saying, I came in with Halley's Comet, I'm going to go out with Halley's Comet. And that's exactly what happened. Like when it came around again in 1910 was the same year that he died. And
really?
Yeah. So that was like intentional, it had to be an intentional comment for him to, because I'm sure they looked up like what did we know about astronomy in the late 19th century, and like Halley's Comet was a known thing, and they knew that it had come back around again.
Wow.
So, anyway,
that's so fun.
Super cool. Super cool fact. So yeah, for me, this episode reminds me the most of another favorite sci-fi series and storytelling, which was the Silence in the Library Doctor Who episode.
Totally.
Where we meet River Song for the first time, because they're existing in different time streams where the Doctor hasn't met her yet. That's his first encounter. But the River is like at the end of her story with the Doctor. Mm-hmm. And that's almost a huge parallel to how Guinan talks to Picard, because she's like, you have to go on this mission. If you don't go on this mission, this is all going to change. And so he's like, oh, okay, I'll go. And then that Guinan, in back time, we learn that that's her first meeting of Picard and the Enterprise. And so when she's joined them later, it's because she met them back in the 19th century. And I love that. I think that's brilliant. So good.
I love, like, this whole two-parter was so well laid out. Like, when she says in the very beginning of the episode, she hears what's going on, and she's just, all she says is full circle. And then we don't get back to it for like another 20 or 25 minutes.
I just got chills when you said that. I love it.
So good. She's amazing. I'm so obsessed with her. Oh. Just in general.
Obsessed. Yeah, Guinan, Whoopi Goldberg, the whole way she's played, everything about that character is fabulous. I personally love, so for those of you who watch Deep Space Nine, and I'm so sorry I keep doing this to you, we're getting closer. We only have 2 more TNG seasons to go.
I know. I'm starting to get really, really excited about Deep Space Nine, so I better not be disappointed.
I know. Well, because it's been a thing that, like, when they've hired actors for one-off roles in TNG, then they were offered roles in, Deep Space Nine, because they'd worked with them before. So we're seeing people pop up like Max Grodenchak in the Ferengi episode. This one has Mark Alamo, who plays Gul Dukat, who is like a main recurring bad dude. But he's the poker guy. Like at the beginning when Data goes in and he throws down the poker game to get all the money. The main poker dude who gets really upset with it is Mark Alamo.
Gotcha.
Who plays Gul Dukat. And so you'll have Gul Dukat feelings one way or the other. But I'm really excited for you to meet him. The other thing is, like, the aliens are legitimately creepy, like, in this one. When they're walking around the cavern, and is it Data or Troy who's, like, describing what they see?
Well, Data describes what he's seeing when he goes through, but Troy, she had a super sort of kind of trance-like Betazoid moment.
Right, because she was feeling the emotions, right? But Data, that's right, because then when he shifts out of he goes into like the time phase with them, and he's describing what they're seeing, where he's like, oh, it's like these body-like things with no faces and holes in their forehead with like streams coming out of them. I'm like, that's terrifying.
Yeah, and you're right. It's like the fact that he's describing it makes it even worse. Yeah. Because your imagination just goes wild.
Yeah. And it was very like, it was kind of Dark Crystal vibe, of like suck the force out of people.
Totally.
And then when we do see the bodies in there, it is creepy. It's still creepy.
Yes.
It held up. But I think this episode has a very Doctor Who feel to it. That's like my, in a great way. Like I feel,
totally.
Yeah. Those are people who know me. We'll talk about Doctor Who another time. But in a good way, this is a great Doctor Who episode. I love like Data on his own, figuring all those things out. Like just being like, okay, I need money. I need to dress human. I need to pretend to be human. I need to
all the way through, I am a Frenchman.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's so good. It's so perfect.
Oh, Data, he was so sweet.
Yeah, and Andy brings up the darker side of this episode that I was trying to forget. That is, they basically are like, oh, it was really smart for these people to show up during a pandemic and start randomly killing people because we wouldn't notice them among all the other bodies. And I was like, I mean, that's okay. That's No worries.
Good times.
But it's just like reality. You're not allowed to forget.
Right, exactly.
You can live in your Star Trek world, but we'll remind you. So that's all right. It's okay. Let me see. How did you like the Mark Twain character, Samuel Clemens character?
Well, I mean, personally found him kind of annoying. Just but then I was thinking of, we have, I think we have recordings of Mark Twain. Maybe,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we do. So I could tell, that was he was going for the voice. Like he was trying. um, but so he again kind of took me out of it a couple times because I was like, just shh.
That's funny.
But he was great. I mean, it's Mark Twain. Like it's you can't not love Mark Twain.
And I love too. This is sort of one that I always forget when I hear, like, when I go back and watch this episode, is the Jack London bit when, like, the kid is idolizing him and he's like, oh, Samuel Clemens, I really want to be you. And he's like, kid, you got to go off and find your own adventure. Like, you got to do this. And as he's leaving, he's like, just remember the name Jack London. And I'm like, that's awesome.
So great. I love little bits like that.
Yeah, but for me, Mark Twain, it wasn't so much the voice that I struggled with, but it was the chaotic neutral energy that he brought to the story of, like, tracking them everywhere and showing up every time. I was just like, God, just follow the rules and leave him alone.
Yeah, but I love how unfazed he was by being on the Enterprise.
Right.
He was like, this is just not that special.
Yeah.
And it's and he's like, he was all, all in his conviction about humans are horrible and da 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 da, and then Deanna like tells him a few things and he's like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then he's like switches his whole demeanor to be like, people are amazing and awesome, and he leaves his watch for them to find, and it was like, aww.
I know, I loved that when he basically was just like, okay, well then I'll go, and I'll, to not, it was like he just kind of got the time travel thing, and he's like, okay, well, to close the timeline, throw me back in my time, I will leave the clues for you, and we're good. And I love that. The interesting thing, too, especially since we've seen Picard, which I think people who are avoiding spoilers probably shouldn't listen at this point, but it's interesting how Data talked about death in this episode.
Yeah.
Where Geordi especially was incredibly disturbed that they found Data's head. And Data's response was basically like, I'm comforted that I know I'm gonna die. Because prior to this, I just figured I would watch all my friends die and make new friends and watch them die and live forever. And so this idea of death for him was very comforting, which...
Yeah. Coming from Data, I really kind of liked that. It was a really another interesting insight into him. And it made sense to me that that's how he would think of it. And I think it helped Geordi a little bit, reframe how, because he was annoyed that Data wasn't more, upset about this and wanting to find all the clues out and all of that. And I think very interesting perspective from Data's point of view.
Yeah.
And which made sense.
Yeah. For sure. I love it. I think it's great character development. And it's one that, like, because we've seen these characters in Star Trek plenty of times. And I think even, you haven't necessarily watched all of them, but there's always one or two in every season, every series, who is striving to be human. And, Mikhail, the whole immortality. That's really Data's kind of unique aspect compared to everyone else, because the original series had Spock trying to figure out humanity and how to balance that. Voyager had the Doctor, but then also Seven of Nine, and this series has Data. And in Deep Space Nine, we have Odo and stuff as well. But Data's kind of the only one who's gonna live forever. So it's like he knows he is never gonna fully be human because he will always continue on living. And so for them to come back to that, especially in Picard, and kind of close Data's arc with that, was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. This gives a good sort of call out or premonition to Picard, I guess.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's interesting to watch it knowing how Picard ends.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was really good. Really good. Oh, such a good episode. I have so many notes on this episode because I love it so much.
It's so good. This did have one of the funny like Star Trek-y science thing I mentioned earlier. So like they come up with this thing for Data to use because Data's the only one that could do it sensitively enough, right? And he goes through and then he disappears. And so Picard's like, well, we need to do it again. And Geordi's like, we can't. Yeah. That's impossible. I can try, but I just don't think it's gonna work. And then it's like 5 minutes later, okay, so here's some super sophisticated technology with the things that this will work, and I can do the field like this and it'll work perfectly, and I just whipped this up and it's going to do exactly what we need it to.
Exactly.
That happens all the time, and it's just really hilarious.
It does. I love that.
You could just look at the president and be like, yeah, this is going to be possible because we're super smart scientists.
Right. Well, the whole thing, like, and I like the initial, you're right, because then they're like, well, we figured it out. But the whole thing is the precision measurements. So the analogy, because I did this in my episode club, we did this episode as well. Nice. So we dove into the science aspect, but it's basically this idea that they had to find a precision for the time stream, the subspace time stream that was basically down to the thousandths. So 0.00 something. And Data was the only, it was 0.004, 0.004%. So yeah, a lot. And Data was basically like, well, I have that level of precision, and so I can do it. The way I kind of describe it is basically like everyone else on the Enterprise is running around with rulers that go down to like centimeters, and Data's running around with one that goes down to millimeters. And so he's like, so I can measure to the millimeter, and they're all like, okay, you go do it, you figure it out. And then he goes, and then they're like, okay, can we figure out how to get ours down to the millimeter? And so it's like, that's kind of how I view that one, but I spent way too long thinking about that. I love Guinan's cocktail.
Oh yeah.
Where it had to be, what was it? They changed the evaporation point so it's a 0.5 degree below the body temperature of the customer, so it evaporates instantly upon consumption. Love it.
I was like, I want to try that.
I know, exactly. The aliens, I think, we mentioned this, are appropriately creepy. Just the couple who are like wandering around. That was the Doctor Who feel,
Definitely. And that snake thing that turns into a real snake thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Creepy snake thing.
Good way to get drunk quickly, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, any final thoughts on these?
No, I mean, such a good, such a good grouping.
Awesome.
Yeah, totally excited to start season 6.
Last 2 seasons, we're here.
Can't believe it. This is a really big deal.
It is a really big deal. It is. So we'll aim for like 2 through 7, but we'll have a look at the list and kind of let people know what we're going up to. But yeah, it should be great. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Me too.
Thank you for everyone in the chat who hung out with us. This was really fun. We always love the company.
We do. It's great.
So yeah, I guess we'll just say our farewells. But all right, everyone, take care of each other. Get up, stretch, have a glass of water, enjoy. Because we're brilliant, Andy. That's how we roll.
We're brilliant.
Yeah, you can see how I was a very efficient manager. We never run our meetings over. So, all right. Well, thank you all for hanging out with us, and you will see us next week, and you will see me. I might be streaming tomorrow, but it's Memorial Day, so we'll see you playing games and stuff. But then, at the very least, on Tuesday, we are going to be talking about Deep Space Nine's Children of Time and Voyager's Relativity. So if you're dying for more Star Trek, go watch those, and then we'll talk about the science behind those on Tuesday afternoon. So thank you very much. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Todd. Everyone, and Mikhail, everyone who hung out and wasn't chatting too, you're always welcome. So until next time. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye. Thanks.